Yeah, so I would like to tell the story of the Boston Islamic Seminary, also from a personal angle. What I mean by that is that I personally had witnessed the growth of this organization, first as an volunteer and later on as a board member. And I hope that will also help shed light a little bit better to the impact it has had on our community. So in 2015, when Boston Seminary was started, I was elected the president of my Muslim Student Association at MIT. And working closely with our student body, I realized that many of my friends had never proper access to Muslim leadership and scholarship in their masjids and communities around the US and even around the world for students who are coming internationally. And I realized that some of the most strongest minds of our Muslim community in top colleges in the US were lacking to resources to become Muslim agents of positive change, to channel their energy and their genius for service to our community. In fact, at the time, based on different statistics, there were more than 2,000 masjids around the US and thousands of Muslim organizations, but they lacked properly trained leaders to maximize their community's potential, just like my friends at MIT at the time. And so we actually turned to an organization that was just forming, the Boston Islamic Seminary. In 2015, when I was going through this experience personally, Boston Islamic Seminary was just forming. And it was forming to exactly fill in this gap, to train the next generation of American Muslim religious leaders. And obviously, my friends and I immediately got involved in BIS programs that were getting started at the time, and helped even actually launch and be part of some of the first cohorts that got involved in these programs. Some of these programs included the ICRA Fellowship, which actually I personally played a part in getting started with some of other student volunteers, which gave a room for college students and young professionals to build an Islamic foundation that they can use in their professional and personal lives. Along with graduate certificate degrees and continuing education programs were launched in a short amount of time. And at the time, Boston Islamic Seminary was already on its way to be the first organization to grant the master's degree that you will learn more about today. And in a short amount of time, like I said, in 3 years, we turned into a big community of scholars and students and seekers of knowledge that were aiming to learn so that they can make a positive impact in the community, inshallah. And over time, as we got to hear today, Boston Islamic Seminary is at a place where, with its 25 faculty, with 60 programs it has launched and ran so far, and 700 graduates, it has turned into an anchor in our community in the greater Boston area, as well as it's becoming one of the leading programs, education institutions in the United States. And finally, we're excited to actually today tell you, and as our first info session, tell you more about the Master of Islamic Religious Leadership. This is the program that BIS has been working towards launching. The program's curriculum was actually designed several years ago and put in place, and it's going to be the flagship program that will enable training the next generation of American Muslim leaders. And inshallah, with every program of BIS, just to show you the people behind, scholars behind, these are just some of the names who are endorsing the work of BIS, endorsing the work of the Master in Islamic Religious Leadership, and have taught classes in the past. So just to give an introduction before I let Ustad Sharif talk about the academics of the program, why did we start the Master of Islamic Religious Leadership? The Master of Islamic Religious Leadership, MIRL program, as we abbreviate, aims to prepare professional American Muslim religious leaders for committed and compassionate service to society. So really the goal of this program when you come and is that we look at you as brothers and sisters interested in program, as members of our community who would like to take their service to Islamic communities at next level. Maybe some of you may have been already leaders in your community doing this part-time along with your work, and you have been helping with your local masjid or some nonprofits and so forth. Maybe some of you are already full-time and have committed their careers to service to Muslim society. But this is a program that will bring these perspectives and different journeys together to give you the tools necessary to turn you into, to train you and cultivate you as professional American Muslim religious leaders who have the tools and understanding to do this service in a way that has never been done, inshallah, before. So I will before I let Ustad Sharif talk about the program itself. Our goal is that our graduates, yourselves, will be able to serve in a variety of different roles as imams and chaplains in different organizations, as leaders of Islamic centers, youth leaders and counselors, as well as directors in nonprofits. But not only these, but also in places where you can use this type of pedagogy to bring an Islamic framework to the work you're doing. So, for example, this nonprofit could be a nonprofit for empowering Muslim youth in financial literacy. It could be a nonprofit on, psychological counseling. Basically, it could be any area of life where having been trained with an Islamic framework, an understanding of the context that Ustad Sharif will talk about, will empower you as an agent of change. So with that, I will let Ustad Sharif go into the details of the program, inshallah.
Okay, Bismillah. So I will share my screen now.
I'll just stop sharing.
Okay. 1 second. Okay. So can everyone see the screen now, the slide with the concentrations? So basically, the master's...
So Ustad Sharif, if you click on top right, I think it will make it like full screen. There's this button top right there, I think.
Well, it looks like it's full screen. Oh, like that?
Here we go. Okay.
Okay, so the Masters in Islamic Religious Leadership, or MIRL program, is a 3-year program, 3 complete years. So those are 6 semesters plus 2 summer internships, and we'll get to this towards the end. But the unique thing about the program is that, when we think of an Islamic religious leader, we usually think of the imam of a mosque, which of course is the primary kind of religious leader that we continue to need. However, we also notice that imams in mosques, particularly in the West, are called upon to do so many different jobs. They're called upon to guide the community religiously and spiritually, to give the khutbah, to give halaqas and so forth. At the same time, many of them are overwhelmed with requests for counseling, whether it's family counseling, marriage counseling, youth counseling. They're also in charge of dealing with the media, dealing with government officials, dealing with interfaith communities, people from other religions. And this is very overwhelming for one person to be able to handle. So the thinking behind the curriculum development at the Boston Islamic Seminary is that any Muslim religious leader, particularly in the West, needs to have some familiarity, good familiarity, with all 3 of these different aspects. So religious knowledge is, of course, the most important component, but then also some counseling skills and some ability to deal with the outside world, so to speak, media and interfaith and so forth. So the curriculum includes components that belong to each of these 3 different domains. At the same time, the 3rd year of the program allows graduates to specialize in one of these 3 tracts. And the idea is that, when they go out then to work with a degree, they would have all 3 of these, but they would have a specialization in one of them. So an imam or a leader who ends up with a specialization in religious and spiritual leadership, presumably most of his time would be spent doing things like the khutbah and religious lessons and so forth. Someone who comes with a degree or graduates with a concentration in religious counseling and arbitration might do a little bit of that, but they would really be specialized in the counseling part, marriage counseling, family counseling, youth counseling, and so forth. And then the 3rd track is the outreach and dawah. And this person, again, while having been trained also in religious knowledge, as well as some aspects of counseling, this person would really be, most proficient and most capable of dealing with kind of the relationship between the Muslim community or center where the person works, he or she works, and the outside community. And so we will see which aspects of the program cater to these different types of specialties. So those are the 3 different kind of tracts or specialization tracks that the MIRL program encompasses. And, and so all of these tracks, the entire program for the whole 3 years, is based on a kind of unique blend of 3 components. One is sacred texts, contemporary context, and skills and counseling. So of course, as Muslims, everything we do as far as Islam is concerned is all based on the primary sources of revelation, meaning the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So everything Islamic begins obviously with our sources of revelation. And so the program will train students to be able to be familiar with and to be able to read and understand and interpret in our context the Quran and Hadith. Students will study, as you can see on the screen here, Sirah of the Prophet ﷺ, also Aqidah, Fiqh, and sort of Tazkiyah, the main portions of Islam, as we know from the famous Hadith of Jibreel. So Aqidah meaning belief or creed, Fiqh meaning the rules of the Sharia by which we are required to live, and then Tazkiyah and ethics, the internal reform of the individual, the spiritual component, right? So Quran, Hadith, Aqidah, Fiqh, and Tazkiyah form the basis of this aspect of the program. In addition to that, there will be also some engagement with Islamic intellectual history and social history. The second part of the program deals with the contemporary context, right? So Islam is based on universal teachings, transcendental teachings, which are the same in every time and place. So the basic aqidah, the fiqh, this is the same no matter where you live at whatever time. However, we exist in different contexts at different times, and every period of history, every location in the world also will have challenges that are specific to that time and or place. Whether those are intellectual challenges, like today we face secularism, atheism, scientism, all of these types of, liberalism, all of these kinds of ideologies that tend to challenge and undermine the faith of Muslims. And we also deal with practical challenges, especially in the West. How do we live as a religious minority in a kind of secular society? How can we be active and productive members of society, but without becoming so integrated that we lose our faith and are not able to pass it on to the next generation? So all of these make up the contemporary context in light of which we are trying to live and thrive as a religious community, particularly in the West. And so aspects that we will look at in this portion of the curriculum are things like you can see on the screen here: intellectual foundations of the modern world, religion in contemporary America as a general phenomenon, religious and social movements in American history, and contemporary Muslim challenges, right? So this is sort of taking the textual basis of Islam and seeing how this applies and how it can interact with and respond to the challenges of the contemporary context. And then the third portion of the program is skills and counseling. And so, as we said, whether you are going to specialize in the religious and spiritual leadership or in counseling or in dawah and outreach, every graduate of the program needs to have skills that they can use to put their knowledge into practice. And so there are courses that specifically look at leadership skills. What does it mean to be a leader in a community, and particularly a Muslim leader in a Muslim community? Communication skills like public speaking, interacting with media and so forth, and then counseling and also internships. So again, the program is a combination of texts, context, and skills. And this we see is sort of the unique contribution of the education provided by the Boston Islamic Seminary, because up until now, most religious leaders that we have normally have just the first component, which is the texts, Islamic texts and sciences. Of course, that's the absolutely foundational and most important one of the three. But if you only have that and don't know anything about your context, and also have no practical leadership skills, communication skills, or counseling or interpersonal skills, then you can be very limited, especially if you're trying to be a leader in a community or fulfill a leadership role and not strictly a pedagogical or a scholarly role. Okay, and so if we move on, whoops. So just to give you a better idea of the courses and how they break down from year to year. So here we have year one, and we can just go through quickly so that you can get a feel for the actual meat and bones of the program. So in the fall, a light among the people living the Quran. So this is an approach to the Quran that looks at the major themes of the Quran and looks at it from a practical perspective of how we can internalize it in our lives and actualize it in our communities. And then the Sunnah of the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So of course, Quran and Sunnah are always the base. And then there is Aqidah, and then fiqh, particularly fiqh of worship and transactions, right? And then there's also an additional optional course in logic and rhetoric, which is a distinction program. So we'll get to this in a future slide, but the program consists of 4 courses per semester over 3 years. So over 6 semesters, that's 24 courses. But you can also do a distinction track, which means you can graduate with distinction. And the distinction program has 1 additional course per semester. So you would do 5 courses instead of 4 courses per semester over the 3 years for an additional 6 courses, meaning 30 total courses. And so when we go through this and you see the 4 courses listed, and then there's a blank, and then you see another course listed and it says distinction by it, that course is an optional course. For those who, if you're not doing the distinction program, you don't have to take those. But if you want to do the distinction track, then you would take this extra course as well. And so then in the spring, the philosophy of the prophetic seerah. So again, looking at the seerah, intellectual foundations of the modern world. So this starts to build the context into it. And then usul al-fiqh and the maqasid of sharia, so legal theory and objectives of Islamic law, and then comparative ethics. And then for the additional distinction course is a thematic tafsir of the Quran, so a tafsir al-mawdu'i. And then in the summer, there's a summer internship 1. And then in year 2, you have history of Islamic history and civilization, advanced applied aqidah, fiqh for daily life, particularly in the life of an Islamic religious leader, and then public speaking communication. So here you see the skills starting to come in, right? Public speaking communication, and then leading yourself and others. This is a special focus on leadership skills, and this is part of the distinction program. In the second semester of year 2, schools of Islamic thought, both historical and contemporary, different schools of thought, and then tazkiyah, spirituality and purification, fatawa and contemporary fiqh issues, and then psychology and the social environment in the light of revelation. So this gets more into the counseling piece. And then the distinction course would be a focus on Islam in America, followed in the summer by summer internship 2. And then in year 3, comparative fiqh of the family, religions in contemporary America, qualities and duties of an American Muslim religious leader, and then principles of pastoral care. And then the distinction course would be understanding and engaging the media. So this is sort of an outreach and dawah component. And then the final semester would be applied ethics, religious and social movements in American history, interfaith and media engagement, and marriage, family, and youth counseling with contemporary Muslim challenges as the distinction course. So that gives you an idea of what the actual course content looks like over the 3-year period. Now, the pedagogical approach in general for all of the courses offered is that there's a strong stress and a strong emphasis on spiritual and moral development. This is not a secular college program where you're just coming to gain information in your mind and pass a test. This is a spiritual program of spiritual development and reform, because being a leader in a community, and particularly a leader in a spiritual community, requires a great deal of character development and spiritual development. And so that is absolutely central to all of the courses taught, right? This is taught from a religious perspective, from the perspective of personal spiritual growth and moral development, which a person has to embody in order to be able to lead other people in that in the future. The next thing is that there is a strong practical orientation. Again, this is not a program that is producing Islamic scholars per se. Our traditional notion of an alim, somebody who has tons and tons of texts memorized in full mastery of a number of different sciences, that is a very valuable and important critical thing to have in our community, right? But the religious leadership program is not the same as producing a kind of minted scholar in that sense. So there's a practical orientation right? In 3 years, you cannot master all of those sciences anyway. The idea is to get a strong basis in them, but then to have the eye on the practical application, right? What does Aqidah look like on the ground in contemporary America, right? What does fiqh look like on the ground in our communities, right? We're not producing muftis, we're producing people who are able to apply fiqh on the ground and who know enough to know what they don't know and can have resource to actual scholars, right? When they don't know something and they need to appeal to people with higher knowledge. And then the third component is that there's a strong teacher-student mentorship component, right? That knowledge is not passed down primarily by pens and books, but from breast to breast and from heart to heart. And so again, to have the proper spiritually transformative impact that the program is meant to have, there is a strong mentorship between the faculty of the program and each and every individual student. Some additional components to the program, you saw these in the earlier slides. There's a summer internship, both between the first and second years and the second and third years, so that's 2 summer internships. These are pretty much open. Each student would decide on the topic and nature of his or her internship based on that person's goals and personality and sort of what they're interested in pursuing. Some people might go abroad and study some Islamic sciences if they're going more on the religious and spiritual leadership. Others might do an internship where they're interacting with, I don't know, media or other outlets. Others might do an internship, for example, where they are shadowing counselors and learning practical counseling skills on the ground for youth and families and others. So that will be worked out between each student and the Boston Islamic Seminary faculty and Office of the Dean and Student Affairs. Also, there are a number of travel seminars, which would be mostly like 3-week or so, 3 to 4 week travel programs, either to Umrah, for example, or to visit a Muslim country and visit ulamat, for example, in a Muslim country, or other groups that have similar training programs, or to travel within the United States and look at other Muslim communities that we can benefit from and forge relationships with, and so forth. And so this is also a fundamental part of the component. And then the third additional component is the distinction program, which I already mentioned before. The normal program is 4 courses per semester over 6 academic semesters, and the distinction program adds 1 course per semester for 6 additional courses over the course of the program. And if someone follows that and is successful in all of those courses, then they would graduate with distinction from that program. And so the summer internships, very briefly, graduate students will complete 2 summer internships as part of their degree program. Interns will complete a written work, a project, and a final presentation of their experience. So this is just a little bit more information on the summer internships. Most of this information is also available on the BIS website, so you can always read further details there. The travel seminars provide students opportunities to visit other US cities and to go abroad to learn about leadership and community work happening in a variety of Islamic institutions and contexts. The travel seminars will help students establish relationships and networks with others that will support their work as leaders in the future. And then the distinction, we already spoke about this. And so in total, we have the program is 3 years long, including the summers. So it's like 36 months, 30 courses if you do the distinction program, 24 otherwise, and then also 120, each course is 4 credits. So it's 120 total hours if you do the distinction, and I guess 96 hours if you do the non-distinction program. Admissions is now open. We just opened admissions last weekend, actually. So April 2021, applications have been opened. We are currently accepting applications for potential students for our first full-time cohort this fall, inshallah. Admissions decisions will be made and mailed in July, and the first cohort of accepted students will begin, inshallah, this September 2021. Admissions requirements, just so you have an idea, is a bachelor's degree or equivalent thereof with a minimum GPA of 3.0 on the 4.0 American scale, 4 letters of recommendation, both academic and sort of community-based recommendations, a personal statement of what you are looking for in this program and what you would like to get out of it and your goals for the future, a weekend retreat here in Boston, travel restrictions permitting, memorization of at least 1 juz of the Quran, written and oral evaluations, obviously proficiency in the English language, which is a primary language of instruction at the Boston Islamic Seminary, and then a placement test, which would determine whether students already have a basis in some of the core Islamic sciences. Particularly, they might place out of some classes. So there's a placement test just to see exactly what the background of the student is. Graduation requirements, so on the other side of it, first and foremost, as we say, absolutely critical, is that a person have exhibited and maintained outstanding moral character, religious integrity, and readiness for service and leadership, to be cultivated via the BIS mentorship system and assessed by an internship evaluation and exit exam interview at the end of the 3 years, and then completion of all coursework, maintenance of an overall GPA of 3.0 while at the Boston Islamic Seminary, an intermediate level in classical Arabic. If one doesn't already have that before coming, that must be acquired over the course of the program, and then passing a Quran recitation and memorization evaluation, so both hifz and tajweed, which would cover at least 3 juz of the Quran at a minimum. So to have memorized those and to be able to recite them with proper tajweed, these are the graduation requirements. And at that, if you would like to apply, you can go to the Boston Islamic Seminary website and download the application from there, and then submit it at the address given here, which is also given on the application, mirl@bostonislamic.org. And for scholarships, you could see here the deadline is May 31st. So you have about a month if you're interested to put your materials together and to send them